for most of the 20th century, at least for the middle decades of the 20th century, evangelicals were not active in politics. And this goes back to the 1920s, and in particular, if you're looking for a kind of symbolic event, it was the Scopes trial of 1925 in Dayton, Tennessee, when evangelicals took a beating in the popular imagination because of how the Scopes trial unfolded, and it's a longer story. What happens after 1925 is that evangelicals begin to retreat from this broader public, and they construct in those decades this elaborate interlocking network of institutions that I call a subculture. Congregations, denominations, missionary societies, publishing houses, Bible camps, seminaries, Bible colleges, Bible institutes. This was a defensive posture against what they considered to be the corrupt and corrupting outside world. And this subculture, and it's primarily a northern phenomenon. Evangelicalism in the South is a bit of a different animal for all sorts of historical and cultural reasons. But in the North, at least, and certainly for me personally, I can attest to this, it was possible to grow up in that world and have, in fact, very, very little commerce with anyone or anything outside of that world. My friends were drawn from church. It's not that I was a social isolate entirely, but in substantial ways I was, because I was living and functioning within that subculture. And it was a place of refuge, and it was constructed in part by evangelicals after 1925 as a place of safety for their children, a place where they would not have to encounter the corruptions of the outside world. And what happened in the public arena is that many evangelicals were so content within that world that they were not politically active at all, and many of them not even registered to vote, because this was something outside of their ken in some ways. The other thing that contributes to that is the adoption, and this is one of the turning points I talk about in the book, the adoption of dispensationalism or dispensational premillennialism in the late 19th century. Now that's a $64 word that it is, we could spend a lot of time talking about it, but essentially what dispensationalism was a way of interpreting the Bible that said all of human history can be divided into different ages or dispensations, and the payoff, to keep it short, was that we are now on the edge of the final dispensation. Jesus will come back at any moment, rescue us from this chaotic world, and rain down judgment against our enemies. And evangelicals adopted this overwhelmingly late in the 19th century and certainly throughout most of the 20th century. And that contributed as well, or rather reinforced their sort of otherworldly ethic, their sense that we need to tend to ourselves. Let's not worry about what goes on in that larger world, including voting. So from really 1925 until the mid-1970s, ironically enough, with the presidential campaign of Jimmy Carter, evangelicals are not engaged in politics, certainly not in any organized sort of way. What brings them out of the kind of apolitical stupor that they were in was the Bob Jones case that unfolded in the mid-1970s, and then this rise of the religious right in the late 1970s.